Yep, I'm back. And if you are, it's probably because you've watched my last couple of videos where I enjoyed the Monk's Trod hike across the Cambrian Mountains and then back again. Yeah, hopefully you were inspired and it's made you think about doing something similar. So if that's the case, that's why I'm making this video. I'm going to give you some tips to make sure that you enjoy it in the safest way possible. But yeah, if you're coming to this video and you haven't seen my previous two, I recommend you do that first so you get the most out of this. Right, let's do it. Tip number one, make sure that you are completely self-sufficient. Where you're heading is properly wild, and at some point you're a good 4 or 5 miles away from the nearest road, and you're not likely to see a single other person. So it is seriously remote terrain, and you don't know what the weather's going to throw at you, as I found out. So yeah, you need to make sure that you're carrying enough food, you've got a shelter, so that if you are held up with boggy conditions or you get a bit lost, that you've got a shelter to take refuge in. You do not want to be caught out in those hills. So yeah, make sure you carry all of the equipment you need to be completely self-sufficient. Tip number two, make sure you're carrying an RS map, but also GPS if at all possible, and a compass. I found this out the hard way yesterday. I'm well used to crossing this sort of terrain, but at one stage, the cloud came down, it got quite misty, and I became really disorientated. At the top of the mountains, it's featureless, and it's almost a bit of a plateau. When the cloud comes down, if it does, then it's really hard to work out which way you're going. And at ground level, the path can almost, one stage is quite clear to follow, and then it just disappears. So yeah, make sure you've got that because you don't want to get lost. Tip three, and I know this is a pretty obvious one and it would apply to any trip you're doing, but carry a phone, for obvious reasons really. Reception can be pretty patchy on that walk, but I was quite surprised actually in some quite remote spots. I suppose because you're so high up, there was still some phone reception, and if you do get into difficulty, that's going to be really, really handy. Number four, yeah, however long you're planning for this walk to take, if you've used a device and you've tapped in the walk and it tells you how long it's going to take, yeah, add at least an hour to it. Just so you can enjoy the walk, and if you do get a bit lost, you've allowed for that and you're not going to get caught out in the dark. Well, for tip number five, I thought I'd change the view slightly. So on with number five, and that is plan for wet feet. No matter what time of the year you do it, you're likely to end up with a booty, as I call it, which is where the water spills into whichever shoes you're wearing. The land up there is like a giant sponge. So even if you're walking sort of following a dry spell, yeah, it's still likely to be wringing wet and boggy on the high parts. So yeah, plan for wet feet. Pack plenty of sort of spare socks and underwear, so you're not trudging for a day and a half, 2 days with wet feet. There's really nothing worse. Well, what are we at now? Tip number six. Well, my advice here would be to maybe stop at a couple of the Buffies along the way. If you haven't stayed at a Buffy before, it's basically just it's almost like a stone tent, is a way of describing it. But the Buffy that I stopped at, stayed outside, camped outside on the first night, Buffy, is on the western side of the Cambrian Mountains. So there's a little bit of a detour, a couple of kilometres off the Monk's Trod, but yeah, well worth it in my opinion. And as Buffies go, it's been a luxury. It's got a flushing toilet, running water, and a wood-burning stove. So even if the weather's good, it's nice to stop there, but if it's grim, you might really, really appreciate it. And you sometimes get other travellers staying there as well. So if you've kind of been walking on your own and you're feeling a bit lonely, yeah, you might meet some sort of fellow travellers, share some stories around the fireplace in the evening. So yeah, well worth stopping by. And coming back actually, I've started at the far end of, or the head of the Elan Valley, and there's a Bothy not far from there as well, a couple of kilometres again from the car. Well worth stopping there, and it's where I stopped on my second night. Number seven, and that is to complete this walk with an open mind, and yeah, to expect the unexpected. I've wild camped lots of times, completed many hikes. But yeah, so far this is one of the most challenging ones I've done. It's been a real test of my resolve, and yeah, from everything from forgetting the tent pegs. I've never done it before, but I think it's a mistake that I reckon every camper makes at least once in their camping life. And when I discovered that, I was seriously annoyed. And even with the body nearby, I wanted to camp because I'd brought a new tent with me. And yeah, got a little bit annoyed, but rather than sticking with that, I actually just looked around and looked for a solution. And yeah, I was actually quite proud of what I did in the end. I managed to find some bits of slate, and yeah, I turned that into my pegs, and it worked really, really well. So yeah, sometimes just be prepared to improvise, and just remember that you're following in the paths of monks that completed this walk hundreds of years ago, where they didn't have all of these mod cons that we're used to today, and they somehow managed it. So if they could do it, so can we. Well, I reckon we'll leave it there. I think 7 tips just about covers it. Although I'll probably get in the car and on the drive home I'll think of something else. It's always the way, isn't it? But yeah, hopefully with my two videos of actually completing the walk and this one, you know, you've got the inspiration and the tips to help you get out there and enjoy it, do it safely. Thanks for watching.